So 273. Today we're talking about some standouts in yesterday's matchup between Winnipeg and St. Louis, a game that was the highlight of the night. Two teams who are both playing really well, especially St. Louis lately. They've been continuing to play really well, and they've been able to play well down the final stretch of the season with the amount of players that have been producing. Their lines have been buzzing, and they've just been able to get production from their defensive group, but also their offensive group at the same time. So that's really helped them. And I think it's allowed them to be able to have sustained success over time. I think when you look at how St. Louis played in this game, they kind of fell behind on their heels a little bit, and they're without Dylan Holloway week to week right now. But outside of that, I think St. Louis, they can still contend with a lot of these teams, even with some of the injuries that they're dealing with and stuff like that. I think that they can still become competitive and win some games in the meantime. They weren't able to win against Winnipeg. They lost 3-1, but I think they still played a decent game. And there were times throughout the game where they were able to take a little bit more control in the ozone and they were able to manage play in the ozone a little bit better. But I think Winnipeg just their off rush play and how they compete in transition, it's really hard to defend against, especially for St. Louis's side where they have a lot of bigger-ish defensemen who they need a little bit more time to adapt to that speed off the rush sometimes, I think. And when it came to Winnipeg, they have a bunch of guys coming down the wings who can come at you with speed and come at you with blazing speed. And guys like Nikolai Ehlers, guys like Kyle Connor, even Cole Perfetti has become more of a faster skater. And even down the middle, you got guys like Mark Scheifele. Going up the wing, you have Iafallo, who's played on that top line with Connor Scheifele right now, and some other guys in that mix who've been able to bring some speed up the wing. So Winnipeg, when you're talking about their wingers, they bring a ton of that speed, and it's really hard to defend against in transition. One of the fastest teams in the league by far, and just the way they play on and off the puck. So I think with St. Louis, Philip Broberg was really steady, really noticeable, reliable defensively, reliable as a shutdown defenseman who can play both sides of the puck, play in transition and defend in transition. And Pavel Buchnevich, I really liked his game as well. He's been a guy who hasn't had his best season offensively, but I think lately he's started to get better a little bit more. And with Dylan Holloway out, you could even think that he could have more of a role there and more of an expanded role in that sense inside their top six. But Buchnevich is a guy who can produce offensively. He's really underrated with his playmaking ability and his passing ability, his ability to use his vision, keep his head up with the puck, and those type of things. Robert Thomas, who I believe, if I'm not mistaken, has around 20-ish points in his last 9 or 10 games. So he's been on a heater lately. He's been able to contribute a lot offensively, and just a guy who's continued to get better and better for this team. A guy who's really an architect as a first line center and a staple at that first line center role. I think when you're talking about Robert Thomas, he's just a guy who's reliable in all situations. He can play defense, he can play offense, he can play in transition. He's really good in the ozone with his passing and his shooting ability. He's just continued to blossom and get better over time. As for Winnipeg's side, I thought Morgan Barron looked really noticeable and not a traditional guy that you notice on Winnipeg as often and more of a depth player who plays inside their bottom six a little bit more. I think with Morgan Barron, he's really steady off the puck. He's really bringing a lot of speed, and we talk about the speed of the wings. He was one of those guys that's bringing a ton of speed up the wing as a forward, and he was really reliable and doing a lot there. So he's doing a great job. Kyle Connor, same thing, just playmaking, passing, shot first mentality, but also the ability to make plays and make really nice seam plays. One of the more underrated seam passers in the league, I think. The way he's able to get passes on the tape and also distribute through the seam in tiny windows of space is really something that he can do so consistently and so regularly, it seems like. Even when he's at the blazing speed that he's at, he continues to do that. So he's awesome in that sense, really exciting to watch. And then outside of that, we could talk about Mark Scheifele. We could talk about Adam Lowry. We could talk about Iafallo. I think those guys are pretty obvious in terms of the way they've played. Like Adam Lowry is one of the backbones of this team. Mark Scheifele, same thing. Alex Iafallo, ever since being moved up to the top line with Gabe Vilardi hurt, he's been so consistent there. So I don't really need to talk too much about that. I think with Josh Morrissey, he's a guy who I really enjoy watching in transition. I really enjoyed watching how he's really solidified himself as an offensive minded defenseman in the league. A guy coming into the league was more of a shutdown D and more of a defensive minded D. And there wasn't a ton of activation offensively because when he's playing under Paul Maurice, when he first came to the league, Paul Maurice didn't really encourage as much activation from his Ds. He kind of encouraged them to stay home a little bit. So Josh Morrissey fit more of that style. He was the defensive-minded D at the time, now evolving into more of an offensive-minded D who can play all situations, play in transition, defend in transition. He's really good at defending in zone defensively. I think that's something that's really improved is his man-to-man coverage in D zone and how his tracking has it continued to improve. And I think part of that is having more reps in terms of his ice time. Like he's been able to have that sustained ice time over time, and he's been able to learn how to defend against elite players more often than not. So I think he's been really good. He's so reliable on their power play too, just a staple up there on the power play as a quarterback and just so reliable in all situations. Very exciting as a defenseman to watch in terms of the details of his game and what he brings offensively as well.